EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365. It's NFL Combine Day, which kicks off today, and we have you here for 2 hours on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Thursday morning, brother?
Excited. Underwear Olympics finally get on. A bit facetious, but some actual workouts at the NFL Combine today. So, and defensive line as well. So, defensive front, which should be a big interest to the Eagles. So, maybe the biggest day from the standpoint of the group of players working out for the Eagles.
John, what's your favorite part of the Combine as we kick it off? You've been covering this
when it's over.
Long. When it's over. No, you're not allowed to go. You're not allowed to go negative on me. What's your favorite part of the Combine?
Well, it's not negative. Who did I hear talking about? He's like, some teams, Sean McVay must know, but they don't even show up anymore to the Combine.
Yeah, Shanahan's not there either.
They did a great job, by the way. The Rams in the draft last year. They don't show up to the Combine. Most teams do. The important part is the stuff that nobody pays attention to. The important stuff is the interviews and the medical, as you saw with Abdul Carter last night. They find he has a stress thing in his foot. He's got to have surgery most likely, so that might knock him from number 1 to number 5 or something.
Yeah. They called it a stress reaction.
Stress reaction.
I'm not sure what the difference between that and a fracture is, but...
Well, if they're talking about putting a screw in the foot, they're trying to make it sound better. It's a stress fracture.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, that's the most important part. It was Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles was on Sirius, I believe, and said, I don't care about the workouts. It's like, he's got the film. They get all that information directly sent to them. So, it's about getting to know the players, as and people will say, 15-minute meetings, how much can you get to know a player? Well, it might not be positive. You can sink your whole career in 15 minutes. Yeah. I mean, if you show up and you're at least a clown.
With one organization you can.
Yeah, so you can, it's important to make a good first impression, obviously. And those meetings are meaningful, I think, and teams should show up. I don't advocate teams that don't show up, but because what else are you doing? I mean, come on, you might as well show up.
Yeah, and I value the face-to-face. I really do.
I think that is valuable, right. But the actual workout stuff that people get, that's not valuable to them. The medical stuff by far is the most valuable,
right?
By far. And that's when you get everybody together and you get these, Abdul Carter's so high profile, but there'll be a bunch of other players affected by that as well that they're going to find things out about. So that part of it's important. The least important part is the part that they've made into an event, and that's the working out the 40 times and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, good stuff there. Looking forward to seeing what comes of it. John mentioned the Abdul Carter stuff. Yeah, we'll see what happens with him. Stress reaction, might have to get surgery. They're kind of saying he might not have to, but I think he's going to have to get surgery. How much will that impact his draft stock? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. John, the other thing that came out yesterday, and I got some good Combine topics that we will get into, and I liked a lot of what you said there with, putting faces to a name and meeting people and stuff like that. The NFL owners, what was that called? The owner survey? What was that thing called that came out yesterday?
Oh, the NFLPA survey. Yeah, they do that every year. The Eagles did not score well. That most of the things with the Eagles are the team travel has been an issue for a number of years. For whatever reason, they don't fix that to the player's desire. And then the second part that I talk about occasionally is that the NovaCare complex is just outdated compared to the newer facilities around the league. So you look at 1-2, Miami, Minnesota. They have the two best facilities in the NFL. Dallas is in that conversation as well. All these new facilities have been built over the past number of years. really, really trump what the Eagles have going on in South Philadelphia, to the point where I'm surprised that Jeffrey Lurie hasn't pushed to improve. And it's going to be really difficult to do where they are because they don't own the city owns all the land around the NovaCare complex. So it's very complicated. Obviously, Philadelphia is a blue tape city, so to speak, when it comes to stuff like that.
Right.
At least I'm surprised they haven't considered moving to the suburbs and building one of these first class facilities.
Right.
Obviously hasn't hurt them yet. They just won the Super Bowl. But I do think eventually it's going to hurt them because they are way behind when it comes to facilities to some of these teams that have the brand new. And like I said, there's no coincidence that Miami and Minnesota are 1-2, and they have been the past 2 years. It's got to do with their facilities.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the gradings are a little weird. I got to be honest. I mean, I'm looking at some of them here, and the only things that they were below a B in were treatment of families, C-, D+ locker room, which is facilities, and then team travel, which is F. Everything else, and yeah, like, but
I don't know why they can't fix that. By the way,
head coach, 18th in the NFL. And he's got an A-, and the guy just won the, and they just won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you know what that
like, that's where I'm like, wait, we have 17 coaches in the NFL who are above an A-, above Nick Sirianni. Okay, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? There's not even 17.
Remember, I know people get so upset about this stuff. Remember what it is. It's players and their workplace. They're not defining Nick Sirianni as like an X's and O's guy.
Right.
Number one. It has nothing to do with that. And as you mentioned, he's 18th and he's got an A-, as you mentioned. Well, what does that tell you? That tells you the players aren't completely stupid, and they say they like their boss for the most part to give an A, But compared to the other guys who are all getting A's as well, because nobody wants to blow up their boss. So, from the standpoint of Sirianni, the only notable part is they said he was moderately receptive. This surprised me a little bit. Moderately receptive to locker room feedback on the team's needs, which, if you think about this season, they shifted their whole freaking way they play football because Lane and Jordan walked in there during the bye week and said, dude, let's just run the ball. So I was a little surprised by that. And what I think comes down to, like, he only pays attention to the stars, which is, Jimmy Johnson, common sense.
Welcome to the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean,
if you're Lou Nichols, who they just re-signed, and you're going, yeah, he's probably not going to listen to you. And that's with every coach, but it has nothing to do. And I don't know if was your assumption, but I know it's a lot of people's assumption. There's nothing to do with X's and O's and success on the field.
It's a player. It's the NFLPA, which is
it's got to do with the workplace.
Right.
Nobody's saying Nick Sirianni, because I know Philadelphia fans boy, man, you guys are the best team in the NFL. You guys are in people's heads. And I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to fans. Act like it. Not everything is an affront. Act like it. Nobody's disparaging. That's not what this is about. Nick Sirianni, X's and O's. So, A, understand what it's about, and B, stop acting affronted by everything. Tush push. Jalen Hurts not getting personal foul calls. You're the best team in football. Act like it.
I like it. On the screen, you can see the list of rankings that there is there, the grades that came out. As John mentioned, it's not an indictment on anybody. It's more of just the workplace environment. That's what the NFLPA is trying to improve on. So you can see that list in front of you. The one thing I would say if I'm Jeffrey Lurie is why are we grading out an F in team travel? We probably want to improve that. I don't know. What is that? Is that about the plane? Is that about the hotels? Like, what is that about?
Well, it's about the plane mostly, because that's been an issue for years. And for whatever reason, the Eagles they made some adjustments. They had scored much better last year, coming into last year's. They were fourth last year and dropped down all to 22. The year prior, they were really bad. And one of the issues was team travel. And they added an extra plane and more room. They give the first class seats to the coaches. Players obviously think it should go to the players. That's one I can't tell you why he just doesn't fix it. I mean, he fixes everything else with the exception of the facility, and there's a lot of politics involved there.
Right.
I don't know why he won't fix it, but that seems like an easy fix to me. And they generally try to make the players as happy as possible, as comfortable as possible, and it's not working. It's not working when it comes to team travel. And then the second thing, I got a lot of, because I put out the grades and I put out the highlights, and one of the other things people seem to have a real problem with is the family part of it, the treatment of families. They got a poor grade, bottom 5 or bottom 6. And they're one of 3 teams that do not provide daycare during home games. Now, I don't give a shit about this, to be perfectly honest, but I got so many people.
Right.
Well, I don't get daycare. First of all, you're not an NFL player. Second of all, if your company, wherever you worked, had 31 competitors and 29 of them offered it, you'd probably be pissed off if you knew about that.
Right.
It's comparison. Yeah, our NFL players get a lot of perks. Of course, they make a shitload of money. They generate a shitload of money. They're going to get more perks than me and you as a listener. That's just part of it. When 29 of 30 teams have it and you don't, people are going to notice it.
So the biggest takeaway is we need a new plane and we need daycare. I think problems are pretty good in Eagle Land if that's what we're coming up with here on February 27th. We need better daycare facilities.
Well, they need the biggest one is they need a new facility.
Yeah,
they
the locker
need
room, right?
a new facility. I've been talking about this for years because I've seen some of these facilities, and the Eagles ain't close. They don't even. There are high schools in Texas that have better facilities than
Texas high school football, John, is something else. I lived in Texas for 2 years. I went to the high school football games just for sheer entertainment. That is a spectacle, my friend.
I know. And if you walked into Miami's, the Eagles had a joint practice down there a couple of years ago. It's not even the same realm. The New York Jets, terrible organization, beautiful facility.
Yeah.
Minnesota, when the Super Bowl was out there, I had a chance to tour their facility. It is, they have a fireplace in the locker room. I was joking. Louis Seen, I asked him, came over from, he was originally drafted by Minnesota.
Right.
He said he had to leave early to get to team meetings because the place is so big. It's night and day. These newer facilities, Dallas as well.
Is that simply just Lurie investing the money in it? Is that all that is really?
Well, no. As I said, there's a lot of politics involved. They have this Navy lot right next to the NovaCare complex. In theory, they could just take that lot and build and expand it, and everything would be copacetic. But the city owns it, and the city isn't giving it to the Eagles,
right? And
everything's involved in money. To me, the easiest fix is just go to the suburbs, but they don't want to go to the suburbs. Some people like that. Some people don't like that. But if the city's not going to work with you, and at some point, again, it hasn't cropped up to this point because the Eagles do a good job with basically everything else. But guys, when they come in here from different places and they've seen other facilities, know the difference. And it's freaking noticeable. And look, if somebody's going to pay you more money, you're going to come here. If somebody's wants to win, they're going to come here right now. But if it's even, and somebody's got the Taj Mahal and you got that dump,
Right.
it could ship you the other way.
Can't make it. Can't. I wonder if there's an element. Can't make it too sweet. Got to make them. Got to make them need something more so they stay motivated.
I don't think that's it.
No, I don't
at all.
I'm just messing around. No, it's we'll see what they end up doing with all that. Obviously, got to improve in the locker room. But again, I'm with John. Not that big of a deal on that stuff. You look at the grades. I mean, they're a B in most stuff, so they're in a good spot, and they just won the Super Bowl as well. So don't take it personal, but couple things that the Eagles could improve on, the plane and the locker room and the facilities being one of them. I can't say I care about daycare, John. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I can't.
Well, I mean, people with kids do, but it's the point. Again, it's the point. If everybody else has it, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, I get it. If 29 teams didn't have it, then I'd go, I'm with you. All right, you got enough money, figure it out. NFL players. But when everybody else in your industry has it for the most part, then you're in Arizona Cardinals territory.
Right.
The teams that make you buy your food, or the teams that do chintzy stuff like that. That's you're in that category when it comes to that particular aspect of it. And as Nick Sirianni will tell you, you never want to be bottom 5 in anything. And that includes daycare. If you want to be a top tier organization.
Yeah, I got you. That makes sense to me. That makes sense. I mean, you want to create an environment too where your players can be the best player they can be as well, and I think that might be part of it as well. But good stuff there. We'll see what they end up doing, and I think it is fair to mention what Eagle Nest brings up here. They were already talking about a new stadium during the media week with Jeffrey Lurie. So now with the Super Bowl under the belt, Johnny Mac, the extra money from merchandise sales. Maybe we'll have some upgrades coming to everything.
They got plenty of money.
I know that ain't the issue.
It's the political part of it, and basically, to be honest with you, I blame the city of Philadelphia more than the Eagles. If the Eagles
about everything,
the Eagles, want to stay in the city for because they want to be part of the city, and they don't want to go to South Jersey, or they don't want to go to the main line,
right?
Where there's plenty of space. They could tomorrow. They could say, you know what? This is outdated. We're leaving. We need a newer facility. They don't even have a full bubble to practice in bad weather. Again, Texas high schools have full bubbles.
Right.
The punter hits the top of the bubble, all the time. You can't even punt. It's really not best. It's not becoming of the Philadelphia Eagles to be where they are, but they're doing it to stay in the city.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I credit the Eagles for sticking it out as long as they have. In that one, I would more blame the city.
I do love them being in the city. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, a lot of my friends when I was in high school grew up. They live right across from the NovaCare complex there in in South Philly, in their row homes. But I love them being down there. But if the city's not going to make your life easier or not going to give you what you need, I mean, what the hell are you going to do?
At some point, you got to go.
Right. At some point.
And I'm surprised they haven't made that decision already, because they could easily get sweetheart deals in all over the place and get as much room and as much space to build whatever they want. Jeffrey Lurie's not going to say no. He's going to build a first-class facility, and they should have a first-class facility. Right now, they don't.
Right.
Anybody who tells you differently is lying.
No doubt about it. Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. John, as I mentioned, Combine kicks off today. We talked about the Abdul Carter stuff. Interesting stuff going on there. I got a general draft question, John, I want to start with you on. I think it's one of those things that's kind of debated and talked about, but I do want to get your perspective on it on Birds 365 when it comes to drafting, especially when you're at a spot like 32 and then in the second round, third round, fourth round. Need versus best player. It's one of those debates or topics that people talk about. I mean, when you're in top 10, I think best player, it's always best player. But when you're sitting at a spot like 32, the board is a little bit subjective, more subjective at that point. How do you decipher need versus best player? And what do you think is the right approach for any organization obviously specifically talking about the Eagles, but what is the right approach when you're sitting at 32 and you got to draft somebody? Need, best player? How do you view that?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually as you go lower, it becomes more need, more need is the worst talent evaluator in sports.
Right. I agree with that. Yep.
You know, Brian Billick's the first one who told me that. It always stuck with me. He's not the first to say it, but the minute you start reaching for something because you need it, you're probably going to make mistakes. So actually, the lower you go on the board, it's more you should be just take the best player, period, and then figure the rest out. Now, there's also some context to that. In the NFL, obviously, if you have a starting quarterback, you're not
right.
If the quarterback's the best player on the board, you're not taking a quarterback. So for the most part, Eagles did it once, famously. But for the most part, you're not going to do that. Think about the last time they were at 32. They could have had Lamar Jackson. I have never criticized them for not taking Lamar Jackson at that time. And I'm pleasantly surprised how few Eagles fans have done that. Because it just wasn't a need at the time, and it wasn't even in the conversation. But you could, in hindsight, obviously he was the best player available at that particular point. So there is some context to it, but in general, I describe it as you take the best player at your group of positions you have a need in, if that makes sense. So you never have everything you want, but there are certain positions you're going to rule out because you're so deep or, you're so entrenched. The Eagles aren't taking a running back,
Right.
You're coming off a year where the guy had more rushing yards than anybody in the history of the game. All right. Even if the running back is the best player at 32, you're not taking him. And then there's positional value and all that stuff. But for the most part, the minute you start reaching, we need an edge rusher, we're going to take the best edge rusher, and there's like 5 guys better on the board, you're bored, you're going to make a mistake. Yeah. So always take the best player in the group of the cluster of positions, because even the best team in football, even the Super Bowl champions, the Eagles need help in a bunch of different places, especially as they start to lose free agents, whether it's defensive front, most notably. If you're not bringing Slay back, you could even think about how deep they are at cornerback. Well, then you got to re-sign Isaiah Rodgers, and you got to probably draft somebody as well. So there's a bunch of positions, and certainly as you get lower on the totem pole, coming off a bad season, New York Giants, teams like that, they need everything. So it's easier for them. But a lot of teams, obviously, most notable is quarterback. Quarterbacks always get pushed up the board, always. Even in bad years like this. Cam Ward will go a little bit before he should. Sanders will go a little bit before he should. Even Jackson, Dart, guys like that will go before they should because of the position, the importance of the position, the desperation of teams at the position. And generally, the teams that do that make mistakes, generally. Now, there's some years where last year, those top 2 guys probably deserved it. I would argue Jaden Daniels should have been ahead of Caleb Williams, but, 1-2, 2-1.
Right.
They probably deserved it. This year, somebody like Cam Ward's going to be the first quarterback. He's going to go before he should. It's just the nature of the quarterback position.
Yep, nature of the draft. Here's the one thing I would pose, we just talked about need versus best player. Let's say you're sitting in the draft and you got a couple guys that are graded out at the same on your board or so close that you don't view them as different from a talent perspective. Is that a point where you would go need? Like you have 3 players there, you have them all graded out on your draft board the same. You're going to take the position you need the most there. Would that be fair to say?
For most teams, but not all teams, the Eagles would be an example of Cam Jurgens being the most notable example. If Cam wasn't there, they would have taken Kobe Dean at 51, I believe.
Right.
And they ended up getting him in the third round anyway. But they drafted Cam Jurgens because they believe in, if it's even and they had those guys even on their board, they're gonna take the offensive lineman or the defensive front person if it's completely even. That's sort of their foundational philosophy, and it's worked very well for them. So would most teams do it the other way, like you're describing? Yeah, probably. But I think the Eagles are more disciplined than most teams, to put it mildly.
So another good way,
which again, to Eagles fans, start recognizing this stuff. Stop acting affronted. Like everybody wants to be the Eagles now. Take pride in that.
Everybody in the NFC certainly does. They're all looking up at the Eagles like, how do we compete with that team moving forward? It's going to be interesting to see. There's going to be an interesting offseason. I think Detroit's a team that's going to try and make a bunch of moves and be aggressive. I think the Commanders are going to be uber aggressive. I could see the Packers being aggressive. I don't know where they stand in terms of cap space and flexibility and stuff like that, but I could see them being aggressive. The Vikings, I can't really tell if they're going to be good again or if they were,
depends on the quarterback.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. They're going to move on from Darnold, but presumably. What is J.J. McCarthy going to look like? I don't really know. So I don't know. I think everybody in the NFC is going to be looking at the Birds, trying to claw up on their heels and get to their level.
Oh yeah, I mean they're the Super Bowl champions. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean they're what everybody's chasing.
But it's more. I think it's more so than that, John, because the Rams won the Super Bowl a few years back or 4 years back, however long it was. I don't think teams looked at their blueprint and said, "Okay, I want to copy that." I think the Eagles have really done like good business, and there's an art to what they've done. At least in my opinion, that teams look at and they're like, "We got to try and replicate that because." That is success now and built for the future.
Well, you would think so, but that's one of the things, I bring up Jake a lot, Jake Rosenberg, what we call this a copycat league. They don't copy the right things. Like they're worried about getting Milton Williams or Josh Sweat or Zach Bond or Mekhi Becton to a certain degree. Breaking off a piece of that Super Bowl mojo instead of realizing yeah, it's not about those individual guys. I mean, they're all good players. But it's not going to, getting Milton Williams you're going to get a good player. It's not going to change your team outside of Philadelphia. You're going to get a good player. Like you might get a good player in the draft. You might get a good player in free agency. Excuse me, cough coming back. But they haven't copied the way the Eagles do business. Well, at least most teams haven't yet. That better start to change, or they're going to be in proverbial perpetual chase mode all the time. Because the Eagles' success isn't dependent on one player. It's dependent on their philosophy and how they do it. And how do they sign all these big name players? Well, they do it with voidable years and cash up front and kicking the credit card payment down the road, basically, to boil it down to its simplest form. And most teams don't do that. Could be the owner, could be cash poor like Cincinnati or Las Vegas, But that's the part that teams have to copy. And I don't think they figured that out. But if you look at and the salary cap isn't 100%, but everybody knows where it's going. If you look at the teams in the NFC that have the most space, Washington, it's got 82 million projected over the cap.
They're going to make some moves.
Chicago, just under 80. Now you can say, well, they stink. Well, yeah, but now they have Ben Johnson. He'll figure out something. He'll figure out something with Caleb Williams. They'll be better. Arizona has 76 million. And they were 32nd in that NFLPA. The only good grade they got was Jonathan Gannon, for all the Jonathan Gannon haters. The Vikings have 63 million. So they have a ton of space. The Lions have a ton of space, over 52. The 49ers are over 50. The Packers are just under 50. All these names. Giants are 48. God, they should be higher. What a mess they are.
Yeah, they're
Rams 44. Going down the list. Panthers, these are just NFC teams. Panthers 29. They should have more. And then you hit the Eagles at just over 22. So there's a bunch of teams. I got a bunch more space than the Eagles. Doesn't matter if you don't do anything with it. And by the way, this is not how he called this a maintenance offseason. What he meant by that is ain't a lot of good free agents.
No, there's not.
So,
I mean, some of the best free agents are the ones coming from the Eagles.
Yeah. This is not the year. And if you look at the top free agents, if you want to go, T. Higgins, number one from most people. The Eagles don't need a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Trey Smith is never going to see the open market. He's a good player. Javon Holland's number 3.
You think Trey Smith will be back in Kansas City?
Yeah. I don't even think he'll hit the open market. And most of these guys, and then you're talking about Chris Godwin, at his age, Khalil Mack, he's 34 years old.
Yeah, come on. I'm out on that.
Amari Cooper's, he's post 30. Ronnie Stanley's almost 31. Good player, but
yeah, you're
not looking at tackle.
You're not looking at a good crop of talent here or foundational pieces, that's for sure.
No. Hassan Reddick's back out there. He's post there. Stephon Diggs is 31. What
a fumbling of the bag for Hassan Reddick.
This is a garbage free agency class. And the guys who guys who are going to get overpaid. Milton Williams is one of them. I'm looking down the list. Cam Bynum. He's a good player. But who cares? He's going to get overpaid. I would stay away from free agency for the most part. Now, there'll always be some bargains. You think about Dre Greenlaw.
Yeah, I've been thinking about Dre Greenlaw.
Now, the Eagles, in theory, don't need a linebacker, but in traditional year, I'm talking about teams as a whole. But because of his injury, and it's a gamble because you never know. Achilles' injury is pretty significant. He made it all the way back, and then he shut him down again. But if that extra time gives him time to get out, he was a really good linebacker.
Yeah,
I mean, and you might be able to get him on the cheap, and something could click there. But the top of the free agency market, just a bunch of. That's what's always. I mean, good players getting paid great money, which is not the way to generally win. Right. Occasionally, and people go, well, what about Saquon? Yeah, it worked, but that's an outlier.
There is no free agents like that this year, though. I mean, last year, there was not Saquon. There was Derrick Henry. There was Josh Jacobs. I mean, there was just great running backs last year. I mean, I don't know. This free agency class is not good. I think Slager brings up a good one here. Occasionally, a team is stupid about overpaying. Huff comes to mind. Yeah, it's true, right? As of right now.
Yeah, everybody makes mistakes, including the Eagles. And Howie says that every time he talks. You're not going to get everything right. I mean, I don't – not saying that's what Slager's saying, but, I mean, the people who think you never get anything wrong, I mean, what have you been watching? If you're around for as long as Howie Roseman, you're going to get a bunch of shit wrong.
Yeah, that's fine. But Howie, I'm sure, as he always has, will learn from that mistake and probably not fall into that trap again.
Well, he'll make a mistake signing a free agent at some point because it's the nature you're dealing.
Yeah, but
with
not all mistakes are created equal. I mean, I think Howie probably looks at that contract and is like, "Yeah, we went too big there. I mean, too quick."
I don't know. I don't know. It's not, it's one of those things. Same thing I say with Rager, which was obviously the biggest draft mistake recently. Like the hindsight of it is, well, the Eagles, like he wasn't going to get drafted 2 picks later, which he was.
Right.
Like they were out on an island. Like there were 4 teams trying to sign Bryce Huff at similar money.
Right.
Like they weren't out on an island thinking, oh, we're smarter than everybody else. Yeah. That part is always revisionist.
Yeah, but isn't there also an element of, you talk about margin for error all the time, John. Isn't there lessons to learn there to improve the margin or improve the odds that you don't make a mistake like that? I'm sure there is. I'm sure Howie's looked at them all. Doesn't mean he's not going to make mistakes. I mean, if you're going to take shots to be good, you're going to make mistakes. That's the reality of it. If you're going to play conservatively all the time, then yeah, you might not make as many mistakes. But I'm not saying that, but I'm sure there's something they can do to refine.
Well, I always Andrew Berry has, he did. I don't know if he still did, but he's got a big whiteboard in his office, and one of the things he's got written on his whiteboard was, and I'm paraphrasing, but was a Howie Roseman quote when he learned from Howie when he was here, and that's to win, you got to make a decision that could get you fired. Basically, you got to be bold, which ironically, that's bullshit because Howie's not getting fired because Jeffrey gives him that ability to make a mistake, whereas Andrew probably doesn't have that same ability. However, you get the point. You get the point behind the sentiment. You got to be bold, and you got to make serious gambles to succeed at the highest level. And you're gambling on people, so you're gambling on flawed mortal beings. And in the case of Howie, part of it might be he's just stubborn, and part of it might be he's just trying to keep what trade value there's alive for Bryce Huff, the smart thing to do.
Right.
But I got to tell you, it was pretty compelling when he said the story hasn't been written, and the injury, and they probably have to keep him for one more year, so he's going to get one more chance.
Yeah.
And, a lot of it is Vic. Will Vic use him? That might be as big. That might be what he learns.
That's 100%. That's where my mind is with that is, can Bryce Huff be better than he was? I'm sure he can. I'm sure he has it in him, but will Vic want him on the field? I don't know. That's one thing, John, I am hoping you are right about, and I am wrong about it. And that's that Bryce Huff can be more than he was this year, because I really think the team's going to need him to be better in order for them to have a competent edge rush. Because as you talked about, there's not many guys in free agency. If you're not going to make a trade for Myles Garrett, which I get it's out there and it's possible, but it's probably unlikely, you're looking at a draft guy, 32. I mean, that's big risk there. That's needing a lot early from a drafted player.
Yeah, I agree. Well, the top edge rushers in free agency: Khalil Mack, who's 34 years old, Josh Sweat, who you have and don't want back, Hassan Reddick, who's not coming back here. Trust me.
You don't see that, right, with a Gardner Johnson situation with him?
No.
I don't either.
Malcolm Kuntz might be sort of an under the radar guy from Las Vegas. Baron Browning, he stinks on ice. Everybody talks about him every year. Does nothing. But Vic had him, so maybe that and he's sort of got a little bit like he's half off ball linebackers, half edge rusher. Right. Who does that reminds you of? And then Chase Young, Azeez Ojulari is the guy we brought up. That's a guy I might take a swing at. He's not even 25. Good natural.
How productive has Ojulari been? Because I do like him.
Not terribly productive, but again, bad team. But he's more of a one-trick pony. Like he's
only 240 pounds.
Yeah, he's just a pass rusher. But as a situational guy, as a third down guy, I think he could help you. And if you really want to go like somebody who's older, because you're a Super Bowl team and you want to stick it to the Dallas Cowboys. Boy, if you believe DeMarcus Lawrence is healthy, and that's a big if. I mean, that dude can play. But there's not a lot out there. Not a lot out there.
Nope, not a lot out there at all. We'll see what they end up doing, John. I do want to get your take, John, if you can. I don't know where you are in terms of your draft prep yet, but I got some topics to talk about on the team and how to replace them, and the draft will be included in that. But before I go there, I do want to ask you about some players that you have in mind right now for the Eagles. They're sitting at 32 and 64 with their first 2 picks. Not particularly high up the board. That's what you get when you win a Super Bowl. Do any players come to mind for you right now at those positions, or at least just a group of names? I'm not saying you're making a mock or anything like that, but just a group of names, maybe a position that you like right now for those first couple of picks.
Well, it's definitely defensive front, and I did. I'm trying to pull it up. I did.
Yeah, I'm surprised you're not a little bit more saying like offensive lineman. Like I
Well,
thought.
I did write about the offensive line as well.
Right.
You never say never at offensive line, but to me, there's not a ton of guys who deserve to be in that bottom. Like there's the kid from North Dakota State that Daniel Jeremiah brought up. I got to look him up. Now you got me because I'm way behind on draft prep. But he brought him up as a versatile guy that's a Jeff Stoutland type of player. And that's not necessarily a bad way to think about it, because they're always, when we talk about need, when you're talking about need versus best player available, if he's the best player available, that's a position where they're gonna be willing to take it. If they're thinking about trading down, which I'm sure they want to trade down, but the problem with that is somebody's got to want to trade up. And typically the teams that want to trade up to 32 want the 5th-year option on a quarterback.
Right.
But I asked Jeremiah that, and there's nobody there. Jackson Dart, Tyler Shue, whatever his name is from Louisville, those guys are not worthy of that pick. So it's going to be very difficult. And then if you think about that 2017, 2018 mentality, where they traded out because it was the Lamar pick, and then they traded back up to get Dallas Goedert, tight end, which has worked out very well. This is a good tight end draft. So if they want to replicate that, they could do that.
Right.
There's a bunch of tight ends. Jason Taylor's kid. That could be a way they could go. There's a kid from Miami. Gray Zabel is the North Dakota State offensive lineman. More of an interior guy, but he can play all 5 positions. So Stoutland would love him. Elijah Arroyo is the Miami tight end. So those are some off the beaten path, but mainly it's defensive front people, because the projection is you're going to lose Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, to be honest. And you gotta figure out a way to do that. And you got to get young players, and you got to get them on the field quickly. So it could be edge or it could be interior. They're going to need both positions. And who falls to 32?
Right.
I think it's more likely to be a defensive tackle than it is an edge rusher. So a Shamar Stewart, that's a kid who I think could be good from Texas A&M. Is he really going to fall to 32? I don't see any way that happens. Now, Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, he might fall to 32. I doubt it. But that's somebody to keep an eye on. I would say the kid from Ohio State is somebody I brought up. And he's more Jack Sawyer. He's more of
I like him.
He's more of a bigger, physical base end, if you want to go back to the old way of playing football. And typically that's not what the Eagles have. They have Nolan Smith and Jalen Hunt. So they could use that player to complement them, that type of physicality. TJ Sanders is another defensive tackle from South Carolina.
Yeah.
He might be in the mix. And then if you want to really go off the beaten path in the injury aspect, which didn't work back in the day, so maybe Howie won't do it again, with Sidney Jones. If you're going to move on from Slay, Benjamin Morrison got hurt.
Love him.
A great player, but he hurt his hip. Now, the medical's got to be where they have to be.
Right.
But if you want to just look at, you might be trading down to like 40. And you say to yourself, all right, who's the best player on the board? It might be him if he passes all your medical tests and stuff like that. So those are some of the players I talked about and Jeremiah talked about when it came to.
I was reading Andrew DeCecco's. He did his first mock. I liked his pick. This is a guy I watched throughout the college season this year. He had defensive tackle Walter Nolan from Ole Miss.
Yeah, I just mentioned him. He's one of the guys. Yeah. I don't think he'll be there if he's got him at 32.
Yeah.
He's probably going to go 20.
Good replacement for Milton, though.
Yeah, and look, if he's there, it's easy, but I don't think he's going to be there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Same with Stewart. Those are the first two guys I mentioned because if they make it there, I think it's a pretty easy choice, but I don't think he's going to make it that deep. Because he's more of a, athletic pass rushing defensive tackle. Like a run stopper may make it to 32.
Right. Yeah,
I don't think he's going to make it there. Now, Nolan Smith made it to 30 because of his size.
Right.
But you're not with a guy like Nolan, that's not Walter Nolan. We're not talking about Nolan Smith. He's got everything as far as size, so I don't think he's going to make it that far.
We'll see what ends up happening there. Johnny Mac, good stuff on some of those draft prospects. We'll see what the Eagles end up doing in that first round. John, I bring up, and you talked about trading up and down, and I think I'm with you in that. I think it's going to be a little bit more challenging this year. I'm trying to remember correctly, John, and maybe you can help me on this. Back in the Devontae Smith draft, which was the 2021 NFL draft, I believe about a month or so before the draft, the Eagles traded back. I think they had 6.
Yeah,
they traded back to like 12 or 13. And then on draft day, they moved up from 12 to 10 with the Cowboys. I think that's how it went. And the Eagles then selected Devontae. Yeah. Do you think there could be a pre-draft trade to try and get ahead of that draft day, hype that everybody's trying to move at that point? I think Howie could try and get ahead of this if he identifies early he doesn't want to pick at 32.
No, because 32 is about, when you're that far down, it's about people want to wait to see what's there.
Right.
Like people with 32 want a specific player for a 5th-year option. Now, typically that's a quarterback, as I said, so it's going to be more difficult this year. But it can be for other positions. I've talked to Howie about that. There's positions you want the 5th-year option, and there's positions you don't want the 5th-year option. Quarterback is not the only one where you want it. There's some other ones, edge rusher, defensive tackle, those types of things. About, offensive tackle maybe. So you have to wait to see how the board falls. Back the Eagles, I forget where they started. But they were high in the draft, the draft that you were talking about when they moved down. And they had a group of players they liked and felt that they could do that. And knew pretty early in the process that they were going to be comfortable. And to be honest, they thought one of the corners was going to fall to them. That's what they wanted.
Right.
And that was J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain.
Yeah, both of them got taken.
So that kind of surprised them.
Has
And then they
J.C.
had,
Horn lived up to the hype, John? I haven't really followed his career much. I haven't heard his name much.
well, it's not, he's a very good player. He's been hurt. And he hasn't been Patrick Surtain, who's defensive player of the year, but he's a very good player. The Eagles actually like Horn more than Surtain. They would have taken Horn before Surtain. But they liked them both, and they would have taken them both. But yeah, he's been a very good player. He got hurt his rookie season, he got hurt his third season, and he plays on a bad team. But he's really good. He's not lived up to what Surtain has done, so that'll always be held against him because he got chosen first. Horn went 8th, Surtain went 9th. So they had 5 players they were considering, and they thought one of them is going to be there at 12. And of that 5, one was Jalen Waddle, who ironically went 6th to the Dolphins. One of them was Kyle Pitts, who went way before people expected. I believe number 4. And the other 3 were Horn, Surtain, and Devontae. And now there are, as I said, Jamar Chase was in that draft, but the Eagles didn't think it was realistic. Even at 6, they didn't think it was realistic. And Chase ended up going 5. So he didn't go as high as most expected. But they didn't consider that, realistic. Zach Wilson, that wasn't realistic. Nobody likes to bring that up. And then Penei Sewell was in that draft as well. For some reason, they weren't enamored, which is a bit of a surprise. But those were the 5 players. And once Surtain was the last one to be chosen, and the New York Giants were at the Cowboys were at 10, but the Giants were at 11. And that the Eagles knew, and the Eagles were at 12. The Eagles knew that Giants were taking Devontae.
Right.
So they had to go up and get him, or otherwise they probably would have dropped down. And the Cowboys wanted Micah Parsons, so they're like, all right, we know the Eagles are not taking Micah Parsons. We know the Giants are not taking Micah Parsons, so we can go back to 12 and still get Micah Parsons.
It's amazing how much that move flustered the Giants, though.
Oh,
I mean, the Eagles take your guy, and then you just take the next wide receiver. I mean, fucking take the better play, take another good player. I mean, that was such a.
It happens, it happened with Houston too. The Eagles, with the tackle they took. I'll have to look that up. I forget the exact, but they panicked too. In the case of the Giants, they dropped down and took Kadarius Toney, with disaster of a pick. Even though he did help beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl with Kansas City.
But for them, it was a disaster.
For them, yeah. But anyway, it worked out really well for the Cowboys. It worked out really well for the Eagles, and the Giants got screwed.
I'm surprised that more people don't call out that. I think because we both made out good and people love Devontae Smith, but yeah, Micah Parsons at 12 was a steal for the Cowboys.
Yeah. Well, I always say I hope Micah plays here one day, just because I want to see the 180s.
It would be fun. Yeah, it would be fun.
And he obviously loves.
I would love for Mike Parsons to be in Philly.
He's
I don't know.
great.
One thing I don't know is do you put anything on the I guess the intangibles of the player? Does anything about him raise a red flag in terms of just off the field stuff and distractions and maybe not being bought into the locker room? I don't know. I feel like the Eagles have a tight knit group and a good camaraderie.
I don't know. He's already friends with Slay. I saw AJ talking about that with Gilly.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Gilly the kid, whatever. I mean, people got to get, again, it's as AJ was trying to explain. These guys are all friends. Yeah. I mean, I get it. It used to be different. And I always say, I'm the old guy. I shouldn't be as forward thinking as I am. I'm supposed to be the non-forward thinking guy. Everybody's got a podcast. Jason had a podcast. He started his podcast when he was still playing. That's the most popular one. Slay's got his podcast. Everybody's got a podcast. Mike has got a podcast. Who cares? Can he play? I tell you all the time how The Eagles have a lot of hubris, as an organization. Like, they do not care about 99% of the players' matchups. Like, when we're all talking about what are they going to do? They're like, and we're going to throw it to AJ. Our offensive line, we're going to leave our tackles on an island.
Right.
Our front four is going to beat your ass.
They got supreme confidence in their personnel.
Yes. And they know they can't block Micah Parsons. So when I hear that team talk about that player,
right,
the way they talk about that player, it resonates with me. And that's why I talk about him the way I talk about him. Nick has been on the record. Forget about it, off the record. That's why I can talk about it. He has said it numerous times. If you can't block him, read him. And that's what they do.
Well, that is Micah's Achilles heel. Is he's not as good against the run.
They can't block him. And that is the only player I have ever heard.
Myles Garrett that has got to be in that combo.
I've not heard them talk the same way. I've heard Jordan and Lane talk about him in those reverential tones. I've not heard the team. Now, part of that might be they just play Micah all the time. You know, when they did play Cleveland, there was a lot of Myles Garrett talk, and they don't see him that much. So you're probably right. But they play Micah all the time. And
I might have selfishly brought that up because we used to have the debate of, is Micah generational? I have Myles Garrett as generational. I don't quite have Micah.
Myles is like, if you're asking me who's better, Myles is better. But I'm talking about the Eagles and the way, and part of it is just, again, the division rival. They got to play them twice a year. I'm sure part of it is just that, but it is very rare when this team even acknowledges they have to game plan for somebody. And Myles would be in that category as well, but it's more because it happens so often with Micah. It stands out.
Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. Great first hour. The NFL Combine kicks off today, everybody. I believe it starts at 3 p.m. I saw somebody asking in the chat. I believe it's a 3 p.m. start. It's going to be kind of a bunch of different things will be starting at different times. So I already got the NFL Network on in the studio. I'll be watching the Underwear Olympics, as Johnny Mac called them. I'll be watching it for sure. So 3 p.m. is the start time today. We'll get to our first commercial break. When we come back, I got some great things to talk about with John, and we kind of just we touched on them a little bit, but cornerback, what are we going to do with cornerback here with Darius Slay potentially out the door? Linebacker, that Nakobe Dean injury, not a great time for him to get that injury, both at the stage of his career, the stage of his contract, and the time of the year on the calendar. So we'll talk a little bit about linebacker, and then we'll get into draft as well, and talk about some players there. And then a question on the offseason for John about Howie Roseman and the approach. So we'll do all that coming up on Birds 365. I appreciate everybody being here today. It's been great to be back in the studio and talk to all you guys, talk to Johnny Mac, talk to Big Sills. Joe Whip, good to see you, my man. Jason A-Team, appreciate it, bro. I got your email, A-Team. I'm so pumped you got the JAKIB merch. Thanks for ordering, my man. I appreciate you. James Jones, our resident Commander fans in here. What's up, James? RC3. Fly Parks, Twiz the Jigga. What's going on, everybody? John, real quick, we'll rattle off 3 super chats, and then we'll get to the break. RC3 became a member. RC3, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. JD3, that's why the players hated Vic in Miami, a bunch of spoiled, soft brats. Now, he sent this very early in the show, so I'm not sure what he's
talking about. The facility.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They're spoiled because of their facility.
Yeah. Well, I do think they're not built to handle Vic Fangio. It's amazing the difference in between how they talked about Vic, or at least the few that did talk about Vic.
Yeah, it's a very small group of defensive backs. Yeah. Again, there's Andrew Van Ginkel, loved him.
Right. But still, I mean, you hear all the Eagles stars like, we love Vic Fangio. We love.
Well, I think, again, I tried to explain this. Jalen Ramsey's going to the Hall of Fame. Eagles once tried to trade a first-round pick for Jalen.
He wants to be.
He's going to the Hall of Fame because he's a press cover corner. He's had tremendous success as a press cover corner, the best press corner of his generation. He wanted to play. more press, and that's not what Big does. Sometimes, he got young corners here who don't have that cachet to walk in and say, I want to do this.
Right.
So sometimes the situation works. Again, you're dealing with human beings. Fletcher Cox went through this, and the shift from Jim Schwartz, I talk about it all the time.
I remember that.
Did not like it. But eventually he bought in, and Eagles went to the Super Bowl after the 22 season. 2021, if you remember, Fletch was not the happiest camper in the world.
No, he was not. Playing
1.5 gap defense, as they call it in the Fangio scheme, instead of the aggressive Jim Schwartz defense where he excelled in. Happens all the time. It's not unique. The Dolphins defense was very good until they suffered injuries to the pass rushers, Jalen Phillips and Andrew Van Ginkel. Look at that defense before that. They were very good. Certain defensive backs did not like it. And the other one, Xavier Howard, by the way, he's like a 3-4-time Pro Bowl corner. So, again, different standard than rookies coming in who are going to acquiesce.
Right. Yep, no doubt. Good stuff there, JD3. Appreciate it. One more from JD3. JD3, thanks for your support, my man. I do appreciate it very much. He says Greenlaw going to have to give Big Dom a cannoli a day if he comes to Philly. Put it in the contract. I like it. I think Big Dom would. Big Dom would sign off on that. He would be good with that.
He's not coming to Philly. I said he might be a value for someone out there.
Well, I do want to talk about him when we come back because I have some linebacker discussion I want to have with you. So we'll talk about him a little bit. JD3, thanks for the super, brother. Philly Don, what's up, Philly Don? Good to see you, brother. Hope everything's going well with you. And King James, he says, John, what's more likely that Howie would do? Trade up or trade back or stay put with 32?
Oh, trade back if you can, but it takes it takes two to tango. Most people think this is not the best draft in the world, and there's not much difference from 15 to 40. So, if you can get a similar player at 40, and you can add extra assets, you do that. So, but there's going to be a lot of teams looking to trade down. So it's always easier said than done, but yeah, his preference would certainly be to trade down.
We'll see what they end up doing in the draft. Great stuff. Great first hour, everybody. Combine kicks off today, so looking forward to that. At least we'll have some stuff to talk about, and we'll review it from that perspective. And then we talked about that NFLPA survey already today. Kind of a nothing burger, to be honest with you, but we talked about it anyway. Good stuff. Appreciate all you guys for being here. I'll give you a quick live read. We'll take a commercial break, and then we'll be back to have some great hour 2 topics as well. Let me tell you guys about the great people at BetUS. Go check them out. It's betus.com.pa. Use the promo code YouTube150. Gives you a 150% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit. You get 125% on your second and third deposit, all up to $2,000. So deposit less and bet with more at BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. They have the fastest payouts in the industry, 24/7 customer support, and they'll even give you your own custom account manager. So big thanks to them for sponsoring the show today. And go check out BetUS at betus.com.pa. We'll be right back in 3 minutes, everybody.